just people to talk about death over coffee and cake. They're not necessarily a grieve cafe. It's just about people sharing their experiences, their beliefs, maybe getting things off their chest, and just providing that safe space, that environment for people to talk about such a taboo subject in our society with freedom and honesty and authenticity.
Welcome to HolisticCircle podcast, Spiritual Conversation. My name is Philipp. We are reaching out to people who are passionate about spreading light, love, and joy. And I'm happy to have here the second time with me, David Jones. And welcome, David.
Hello, Philip. Thank you for having me back. It's good to see you again.
I think my audience getting used to that in December. Everything sounds like I'm on some psychedelic mushrooms because every time I re-invite guests, we're starting with such a laughing and smiling at the beginning. And I think that's a very beautiful sign. So let me quick to new viewers. We have every time new people coming in. This is my second conversation with David. We are not going to repeat everything that we had in the previous podcast. You're invited to have a look at it. And maybe if I will make a micro introduction, what we talked about last time, and then we can look further. David had his own very strong personal story, and we had a lot of space for that story. And then in the end, brought him to the place where he's what's the doula? I'm always saying it wrong.
Yeah, soul-doula.
Soul-doula. I always say it wrong.
So there's birth doulas, death doulas, and soul-doula.
Right. So that's where he came after his long personal journey, and he found his place. And to say it's taken off like crazy, he's becoming a media rock star, if you ask me. So that's super impressive. And this is where we're landing now. And for everything else, I refer you. Maybe would you like to make a quick introduction and also maybe help people, because I think I made it rather crisp.
I think you've nailed everything. You've hit it on the head. But yeah, I've just followed this path after it was the death of my best friend. So it was death that awoke within me something which had always been there. I was just kind of clouded or blinded to see. And ever since that day, I've just been using death as my inspiration, my greatest teacher, and to just keep moving forward. And if there's any fears, just to look into those fears, to approach them and keep taking the cues and keep saying yes to what feels right. And yeah, I use fear as that guidance. And I think this could be my last day. Do I want to have any regrets? No, I don't. So I just keep moving forward. So that's me.
Am I going crazy, or are there some new plants in the back of your office?
I've had a few new plants.
Okay.
I'm quite botanical in here. I like to have as much nature as I can in here. But yeah, they're blooming.
It looks a lot nicer, more cozy than last time we spoke.
Yeah, thank you.
You're really arriving. That is so beautiful because guests are coming, guests are going. That's what a podcast is all about. And then you see some people, and you've really been taking off. It's fair to say the response coming back. So you're in such a strong message. If you say something and double comes back, that's a unique situation. And that's definitely called for another round of conversation, because obviously that people experiencing death, people trying to incorporate it in our modern lives, is just something that's a big thing. And I remember your book. How are things coming on that front?
My book, again, it still keeps opening doors. I wrote that a few years ago now, but it still leaves me to have beautiful conversations. Of course, the title of that book, The Awakening of Death, always raises a few eyebrows. People can become quite defensive over it as well, but it always opens conversation. Well, why is death in the title? And yeah, I'm currently writing my new book, The Awakening of Life, and that's about living, but integrating death into life. So it's the other side of the spectrum and just being as fully human as we can, with all the ugliness and the beauty that can bring at the same time, and just fully submerge ourselves into this very, very brief experience.
Can only hope our little podcast will be one of the places you're going to promote the new book once it's out.
Thank you.
Thank you. And one of the things that were new to me that you're organizing, I think it's a death cafe, or am I just making it up in my mind? But it's like a place.
Yeah, no, you're not making it up. You've got a wonderful memory. Yeah, I'm doing a lot of deaf cafes because I'm filming this from my shop today, in my shop, my premises, and literally out that window there's a beautiful cafe, and we started doing, we can call them deaf cafes, just people to talk about deaf over coffee and cake. They're not necessarily a grieve cafe. It's just about people sharing their experiences, their beliefs, maybe getting things off their chest, and just providing that safe space, that environment for people to talk about such a taboo subject in our society with freedom and honesty and authenticity, which I personally do not have a problem with deaf. I accept that it is part of the beautiful spectrum of life. And yeah, we have some beautiful, cathartic, organic conversations that's come out, and it just hearing other people's perspectives, they're really healing. And yeah, it's something I'm very passionate about. Plus, I get to drink lots of tea. I'm a big herbal tea drinker, so everyone's a winner.
To that note, I say cheers, mate.
I like your cup too. Yeah, cheers.
Because I'm a step ahead of you. I already have my Christmas mug.
You think you're prepared and you remembered all that we said before as well. So yeah, I appreciate that.
But so let's tell the people what I would love to start the conversation wherever it goes. But this is one of the main reasons I wanted to invite you back, because besides the fact that you're popular and trendy and hip, and every podcaster loves trendy people, there is another element. I was so curious because this was all happening already last time we spoke, but I had a sense that this is just increasing and speeding up, especially these cafes. You said you're meeting people, catharsis, you mentioned deep conversations, space for honesty. I know that you've done some fairs and stuff like that, and public speaking and things like this. So you had, to my understanding, at least in my little mind, you got a boost of more things flowing back to you in terms of information, in terms of personal stories and things like that. So if you'd be so kind, I would really wanted to start this podcast more reflective. It's Christmas coming after all. So to start from the reflection point, what came back to you, and then later in the podcast, we can turn it around again with your service you provide and stuff like that. Could you a little bit open up to us?
Yeah, thank you. Well, you mentioned the C word, didn't you, Christmas? And time goes very fast. And Christmas can be a very challenging time for a lot of people because it can bring up memories of loved ones, those that are no longer with us, particularly if it's our first Christmas alone away from a loved one. That can be very triggering. So by doing cafes or just doing my public speaking and talking about death and bringing it out of the closet, it's widely well received. There are a few people that don't want to talk about it, and that's okay. I can appreciate that. But on the whole, people do want to talk about this. And by bringing this subject out of the closet, which is a big passion of mine, we then create that community again and that connection, because life connects us, doesn't it? And death connects us. It's going to happen to all of us. No one gets out alive out of this game. This is how it is. And it's just interesting hearing people's experiences that never had the opportunity to share how they truly felt. And there's so many misconceptions as well, that people believe they should grieve a certain way or behave a certain way when they've lost a loved one. And that's just not true. There's no manual to grieving or dying. One day you can be happy, and that's okay. And one thing I have noticed, you're talking about reflection, people can feel guilty for feeling happy and at peace. I've noticed that a lot. And that's something I've experienced personally, but I've had that fed back to me as well. That people feel like they don't have a right to go on, almost a kind of survivor's guilt, if you like. What gives me the right to be happy when I've lost someone or someone else has lost someone? I should be feeling that. So this is quite a common thing that pops up. People not being able to just get on with their lives and feel a sense of joy. Or, of course, the complete opposite. People feel they have to put a brave face on, and after a certain amount of time, 6 months, a year, well, I've done my grieving, I have to go on now. That's not necessarily true. And they feel they have to wear these masks when inside they're breaking. And if they just had that community and support to be open and honest, actually, I am struggling. Things aren't good. And I'm having a challenging time. So these are all the feedback I'm getting, and it just helps me learn as well that all the fears I once used to hold and believe that as a society, we, on the whole, share these things, but it's just about having that space to be vulnerable and telling the truth. I'm a big advocate now of telling the truth, and it's very refreshing, but it's also very hard because you notice the little white lies creeping in. And in telling the truth includes how you're feeling as well. And if we can tell the truth how we're feeling to another, that authenticity then opens up that connection again, doesn't it? And if you see someone else being vulnerable, that gives you the green light inside as well to say that, you know what, this person's been vulnerable and honest. Actually, I've been holding back all my life. It's about time I become vulnerable as well. And that can be the healing part of those are some of the main things that have come out of these cafes, and just when doing public speaking, and then I have the questions after and just chats in amongst the audience. Is that kind of what you're after, Philip? Does that answer your question? Is there anything more you'd like to delve into?
No, this is exactly what we need so people can understand, because we have this phenomena, right? 50 years back, all of this would happen among friends and family, what you're talking about now. It is exactly this gap, and I'm interested in this gap. And I think maybe that's why one podcast or does things like that, or you speaking publicly, because obviously something has a bit shifted in society, that we don't have this support that we used to have, or most of us had. It's not like a linear story, but still people had stronger family structures or more stronger friendship structures, and now we're more segregated. And whatever is the reason, which is not our conversation. So do you have this sense, this is my real question basically to you, do you have a feeling that a lot of people coming to these cafes or coming to your public speaking, that they do not have the right amount of people to share their emotion with?
Yeah, I believe that. But also that the people might be there. I mean, I do have a lot of lonely people. I have a lot of mature, kind of elderly people that come to my cafes, but then a lot of young people as well that may have the groups around them that they could share these things with. But again, going back to what I mentioned before, they just don't feel safe to. They're not scared of being vulnerable and being truly honest and open. And again, they feel they have to wear these masks, but it's so draining and exhausting to keep up this act when everything's okay. When actually it's not. I just need to cry. I need someone to hug me and just listen to me, just be heard. Not even necessarily give me a solution, just to be heard that this is how I'm feeling, and someone to just validate that without giving me a sort of cliched answer. We know life goes on and it's been 2 years now, it's time to pull yourself together. Just, yeah, I feel that. So another subject, because listen, we're on the cheery subject of death. To me, it's cheery, but some may not see it that. While we're on this subject, we'll talk about suicide as well, because this is something else I'm very passionate about, because I've been suicidal a couple of times in my life. I know what it's like to reach those depths. And I feel if people could just be open and vulnerable and just have a breakdown as such and cry, instead of being this tough facade or these tough masks. I use the word masks a lot because I feel this is what society does. I feel that in the UK here, the biggest killer of men under 50 is suicide. And I feel if people could just become open and vulnerable and have more of these spaces to connect and say, this is how I feel, instead of lugging all this baggage around and this emotional baggage because every emotion we feel goes within us. So we have to let it out. If we keep sucking all the sadness down or the grief or the anger, it's just creating this huge space inside us that we try and numb with external circumstances, but we can't. So I feel if more people could go to these groups or just communities and be open about how they truly feel, that these numbers that are in the UK at the moment and worldwide as well, that this would drop, and that people wouldn't have to die so early if we could just be human. Because emotions are a rich part of the human experience, and to deny our emotions or vulnerability is essentially to deny going to the toilet, or I sleep, I eat. It's all part of the human experience. To shut down any aspect of the human experience then can bring sadness, depression, all of these things that go along with it, because you're not embracing each diverse part of this rich experience. That's another subject I'm very passionate about. So I feel it all ties into everything, and then yet emotions are at the root of everything.
First of all, I thank you so very much for bringing this up. And I somehow have a feeling tingling in the back of my head. It has something to do with the new book in a certain way, that when you talk about integration, that there's obviously a lot of things simultaneously on your mind. And I'm super happy if we can bring this into this conversation. Let me just quick have my say on the first chapter, because I just wanted to say another reason I brought you back is because first time when I heard it, deaf cafés and things like that, I'm quite struggling with the fact that this segregation is happening. I'm quite struggling with the fact that families don't have the strength and power that they used to have. And I always catch myself, like, how can we not bring it back how it used to be? And so it was quite a challenge for me emotionally, because you're going further and say, this is fading out in some way. Society is moving on. Let's find a replacement that brings the same depths and friends and sharing and safe space. So let's bring an alternative. And it took me a really long time in myself to understand, wow, there's just no one way written. And we have a lot of answers for the same question. Nothing is right or wrong. And you're really bringing something to the table of giving a very modern solution to a problem. So this is, just want to say one more time, I think what you're doing is really amazing, and you're so fresh and free to bring it further and add something to the table. So that's just, I really wanted to express that. Because maybe people, as you said, people are out there who are maybe lonely now, and they think maybe I should have a best friend, or I should talk to my daughter or my son. And then it's just not happening, because for whatever it is, you put us all these reasons why it might not be happening. And then you come and say, there are maybe communities online, there are maybe communities around you where you can reach out and talk to strangers in the same and loving way. And this is now on the table. I think it's fresh for me, and most probably fresh for a lot of people listening right now.
Yeah, lovely. Philip, can I ask you a question?
Well, go for it.
Why do you think this fragmentation or decline in kind of societal or kind of tribal connections has happened?
Oh, I got so many answers of this that would break our podcast in half. And I don't want to make it cheap and say, oh, it's the mobile phones. It's just I don't want to make it cheap either and say, oh, it's the end stage of capitalism where everybody has to perform. Everybody has to be on the button all the time. And I know from my own surroundings, I used to work in commercial industry for a real long time. When I started, for one client, there were like 3 or 4 people in the agency dealing with that one client. You had the junior writer, copywriter, and things like that. So it was like 3, 4 people per one client. And now we are down to hardly one person who has to do with a way more job, because there's now all the online media and this and this. So the job has increased ridiculously. And the people dealing with that one client is from 4 people down to 1. And maybe some help, something on the side, or some online helping here and there. But in effect, and this I hear is everywhere. I hear this from people working in banking. I hear this from people there. The workload has increased. It's just, sorry, I have so many answers to this question. It's just a lot of pressure that people are on, and they need to perform. They got to be on the button once they're in the flow, and once they're out, it's just another thing. So I see a lot of pressure. And if I look at things, sorry, I've been talking so long. If I look at things like people measuring their heartbeat all the time, having apps, how many water do I drink? This optimization, this technicalities around us, they're everywhere. And one more thing, sorry, is also the computers, because computers were designed to help us. But in matter of fact, most companies say, oh, this computer can send 600 emails an hour. Now the secretary has to write 600 emails an hour. So we speeding up to the speed of a computer, and not the computer helps us to have more time. And this, I could talk for hours, so sorry.
No, you've given a lot of answers. I was just curious, that was all. Thank you.
I am completely submerged in this conversation. But I'd love to talk about suicide, because actually I think I'm so thankful to bringing this up. And it's Christmas after all, as you said. And we know that this is one of the times suicide is also stronger. It's again the summer holidays and Christmas. It's always the dangerous part. And would you like to a little bit lead us into these conversations, or should I start with some questions? Because there's so many reasons why people, but emotions, loneliness, and you're tackling it from the angle of life, you're tackling from the angle of death. You think there are things unsaid or blocked that could help, or you're looking this from the perspective of a missing community. So where is your first angle when looking at that?
I don't have the complete answer. I can only speak from personal experience, but I would say again, it's the breakdown of society that maybe 2020 caused and forcing everyone to go into isolation. And I'm well aware that suicide rates, particularly around where I live, rose then because people were maybe forced to go within and had that community and connection stripped away. And I know quite a few elderly people that never really recovered from that as well, that still have that fear of going outside now. And I know as well some younger people have as well that never really regained that confidence again, that it's safe to go outside. So everyone went within, shut themselves down, and yeah, that loneliness and just not having anyone to just be seen and be heard. And listen, what we're doing today, technology is wonderful. As you said, computers are made to help us, and we're having this wonderful conversation that's going to reach many people now and potentially and hopefully help them. But nothing from a human mammal perspective beats just having a hug off another human, or just having someone in the same room as you, or the touch of another human just to comfort you. And people need that, I believe, just to be that humanity again. So yeah, screens are wonderful. They connect us in so many ways, but you've already touched upon it earlier in your answer. And it's not that they're the be-all and end-all or cause of this, but they can also alienate us in so many ways as well. And people can be whoever they want behind a screen. But it's to just have that human connection again. And I believe that people don't have that, or that they're not confident enough to go out anymore for whatever reasons. So that there's so many contributing factors. But just to be open, honest, and vulnerable in that safe space with another human in the room. Yeah. Suicide, from my personal experience, at the times I was suicide, I cheated on a partner, and I was just absolutely riddled with guilt. They were so kind to me. I just couldn't believe how I'd done that. I know I'd done it. I was blind drunk. That's another story. But then the aftermath, and I just couldn't sit with that feeling. I just wasn't comfortable with that guilt. And the only way I could see of ending that guilt was to kill myself. The feelings did pass. They always pass. This too shall pass is one of my mantras. It's a law. Everything is changing and temporary, isn't it? And you just sit with what is. I was able to luckily get through that through actually communicating with my partner how I felt. But some people, again, they feel scared to, again, telling the truth and be vulnerable and open and communication. And another time was, again, over a potential lover at the time. And I just felt so heartbroken that it didn't work out. And the stories I told myself about that, again, stories are a big contributing factor. What do we tell ourselves? What do we actually believe about events that happen? These then generated the emotions in my body that I just was not comfortable with. And those are the two times in my life that I've actually sat down and planned to do. So I know it's to be there. But for anyone watching this that does feel like this, I promise you, it does pass. And beneath that pain, because people, I believe, want to commit suicide to escape the pain, don't they? I would say that's a fair generalized statement. People have to realize that pain that you're experiencing and feeling is an indication that the beliefs you hold about yourselves or the situation are out of alignment with the true core essence of who and what you are, which is a beautiful, perfect soul already that's navigating this very difficult and murky situation of being a human. And we're going to make mistakes. It's becoming comfortable about making mistakes, owning them. But you know what? Mistakes produce results that you learn from and hopefully grow. And if you keep falling in the same hole 20 times, that's okay. But you know what? Hopefully one day we'll be able to climb out of it and learn through. I'm not going to walk down that street and fall down that hole again. Hopefully. But that pain is showing you the belief it's not true, that maybe you're dirty or you're broken or you're worthless. To think these thoughts are going to generate emotional responses in your body, showing you that those beliefs are only half true, that they're not true to some degree. And this is where we use emotions as our guidance system. But if we keep suppressing those emotions and ignoring them, this is when the pain amplifies and becomes bottled up. And that you believe that story you created, you believe what someone told you when you were younger, that you're not good enough. And this is just snowballed then to become a narrative of your life. And the only way you can see, and they say suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem, the only feasible option you can see is to end it. And it doesn't have to be like that, because I'm living proof that you can have a beautiful life. And I don't say that out of ego. I just say that out of the hope that it may inspire someone, because I generally enjoy life now. But I'm comfortable with the downs. I'm not denying the negatives at the same time. But there are a lot more ups as well. And I see what can happen when you live from passion and inspiration, and I'm following that drive within that voice that we've all got here. It's just sometimes we get ruled by this up here, and that's there as a tool, not the master, but sometimes we allow it to be the master, and it's just about integrating the two. So I've given you a very long answer about suicide, but I feel, it stems from pain.
First of all, thank you for considering this a safe place, and I hope we live up to that standard. So thank you very much. Of course, give me a minute. I would like to go back to the first thing you said in this before, and that's just why I'm talking to you. You always blow my mind, and that's not so easy if I toot my own horn, but you just quickly brought us to a core that is absolute taboo, and that how many elderly people actually commit suicide. That's a full-blown society taboo. We are okay to cry about, to be devastated when a young person, and he's giving us some examples of the struggle, like in the bloom of his life, we took this path, and all of it we can somehow incorporate in our system. But the thought that there are elderly people who are just so lonely that they just can't take it anymore, or maybe feeling not fully healthy in the way they would like to be at any given moment, and just have nobody visiting them, and all of it coming together, taking a quiet way out. And it's never so much shown in the statistics as it should be, for obvious reasons. There's medication in the game, and things just fading out often. And I'm sure this is one of something that you know more about than a lot of people. I see a lot of elderly people just stop drinking or stop eating and taking a way out purposely because they're rejecting. I've seen this as well. So I'm sure we can talk about a bit on this later, because this is what you do. You're going to hospitals, you're going to people. It is part of the service that you provide. So most probably you've seen this, I'm finished, I'm done. And it doesn't have to be called suicide, but many times it actually maybe is on one level or the other or not. And maybe you will help us there in a minute. And then just coming out to your story that had a moment to process. And I think it's one of the big reasons for male suicide is a broken heart, interestingly enough. And it's such a non-cliche, because the women's are the ones with the feelings and the men's are the ones with the fancy cars. And it turns out we have a lot of male suicide because of a broken heart. And even I myself do know a couple of close friends who have not committed suicide, but are clearly broken through life because a love situation did not work out. Would this be something we should spend a minute on, or should we move on from there? What do you feel?
Do you know what? I think you hit a valid point, because it was heartbreak that drove me to those situations. And I do know this is quite a common theme, that, when it's affairs of the heart, and it's rejection though, isn't it? This is what we're dealing with. Go on, Philipp.
Steve, sorry, I must ask a precise question. And you already said rejection. I think it's interesting, because my question would be, do we think that men just don't have the training from growing up to deal with emotions as much as women? women are always more in a group and they talk and they have all those little things. And they're so much better, usually, in expressing their emotions, while men don't have the training. That is one question. The other would be, as you said, men are also very proud, or they want to get what they want to have. So this "I must have it" feeling is usually quite strong within men. And if they think that they must have for their validation, so that's maybe some of the themes, right?
Okay. Yeah. So again, I can only speak from my personal experience, but growing up, I grew up watching James Bond and Arnold Schwarzenegger films, and these were like men that, killed how many people in a film? 100, hard drinking, and then just got the girl they want and rode off into the sunset, and it's all good. And there wasn't really any emotion. There might be some anger there, but when it came to real vulnerability, which maybe I saw in some of the later James Bond films, of just sadness and breaking down, and in some of the early ones actually in Recognition Hour. But on the whole, I feel that, yeah, we weren't maybe taught as men growing up how to deal with emotions or what they meant, what they were. And certainly from a society point of view, if anyone, I can remember growing up at school, when you go to school, it starts changing. If anyone's crying in the playground, you already start getting labelled, oh, you're a crybaby. And what does that mean? That means I'm not good enough, I'm not a man, and I've got to be this strong person to fit in and survive. And if you were crying one day in the playground and that happened to you from another group of boys or girls, can be either gender, you may then tell yourself a story that crying and vulnerability is not acceptable. You then reject that part of you and then wear the mask, so to speak, that whenever you feel that emotion, you stuff it down, hide it because it's not an acceptable part of society. And then it essentially becomes your shadow that you no longer accept. And then that becomes a storyline. And then what happens 20 years later when you're an adult? A similar situation may happen. And remember, time is not real to some degree. Everything happens now to the subconscious mind. So essentially everything that happens to us as an adult is happening to the inner child version of ourselves. And you might be met with a circumstance that pokes that wound you experienced 20 years ago in the playground, but now you're an adult. And it's your child's response that the sadness comes up, but then the program you learned was to don't show that emotion because you will be labeled as weak, whatever. And then you stifle that emotion and suppress it by whatever means necessary. And then this is a coping mechanism. So, yeah, if we didn't have a particularly emotional father or emotional society around us, that again can influence us. All these things. Screens, society, religion, education, all these things growing up can, if we don't have the right training, and like you said, how to deal with emotions, then this can become very detrimental to an adult version of ourselves.
But the most obvious question I need to answer, so your deaf cafes, are this men and women equally, or is it predominantly women? So how would you, and the second question is to talk to people that you've met, women and men, differently about deaf. Do they have different experience with grief?
The majority, when I do my speaking at cafes, are women. I'll probably say it's still about 80%.
What a surprise.
Even my cafes, I'm trying to think back to the ones I've done. I recall very few men being there, to be honest with you. The majority are women. Yeah. So
We did not imagine that answer.
Yeah. But then when speaking to men one-on-one, that can be a little bit different, and then they can have that vulnerable side to them. But again, using the playground example, if you were to go to a deaf cafe as an adult and you learned a pattern 60 years ago that's carried you through life and served you, then maybe being vulnerable in the middle of a cafe or in an audience and a talk, that might go against what you learned in the school playground or wherever, as an example, that it's just not safe to be yourself because you then may be viewed as a lesser male or whatever. But actually, I'd say that the true strength in life is to express emotion without the fear of how others think. And that's true strength, in my opinion, because to be inauthentic, to say I don't experience emotion, well, that's a lie, isn't it? And that's not strong, in my opinion. But I grew up believing that if I didn't show emotion, that made me a strong man and women would accept me and love me. And it's took me many years to become vulnerable in front of my wife and break down and cry in front of her for that fear of rejection and not appearing like a man for her.
still would like to ask one more time the same question. Maybe we can try. So do you think, you said, okay, one-on-one, I got this now, that men most probably more likely want to open up in a one-on-one setting than going into deaf cafe. And you told us why. But still, I want to ask one more time. Do women in generally, do they a little bit better or differently, or do they have more words? Or compared to men when they talk about, do you see some difference? Or by the end of the day, when they're one-on-one, it's equal. So I wanted to ask this. And then I want to ask a second question. Dying. Do you think that men and women die differently?
Okay. Yeah, sorry if I didn't answer the question before. I'm with you now. To me, they're both equal. Just from my experience, everyone's open and honest. Maybe in a public setting that might be different, but when it's actually one-on-one, when I have like personal clients, no, they're open then. But that's my experience. Again, in a public setting, that might be different. The majority of female clients in cafes or people that come to the audience, yeah, they're maybe more dominant and open with their communication. But yeah, and sorry, what was the other question about dying?
Yes, I'm very interested because I go a couple of times now to emergency hospitals and things like that. I was wondering if you've ever noticed that women die differently than men. It's the most stupid question I've ever said. But then maybe you have an answer to it. Who knows?
Yeah, no, there's no such thing as a stupid question, is there? In my experience, just everyone's unique, aren't they? I can't really say men are like this and women are like that. It's just everyone's different. Some they say how you live your life is how you will die.
I can completely understand.
What's quite common from just people I've known in the latter stages, and again, not to say there's like a black and white stage for people dying. There's something called the fire stage where the elements leave the body. So we've got the earth that is the first element to leave. This can go on for like years and years where the body starts to deteriorate and break down. So this is part of aging, a healthy part of aging. Then there's the water element where people might start to become emotional later in life that they never maybe experienced before. This is the water element starts to gradually leave their body. They can have different tastes in foods and things. And then really towards the latter end of the dying stage, there's the fire stage. And then this is when people can have all their repressed stuff come to the surface, maybe out of guilt that they've hid. Maybe there's like anger that was suppressed, or confessions, something that someone's carried with them all their life is then finally bared to the world because they literally want to get it off their conscience before they leave this planet. It's different for everyone, but if everyone lived an authentic life and had no secrets, this is why, I tell it, please, people, tell the truth, be open, honest and vulnerable, and it's okay to make mistakes. We all screw up. That's cool. I own it. And if people could own their mistakes, there would be less criticism in society because we could accept our own shadows. But if someone went through life open and honest, maybe they wouldn't encounter this in the fire stage and then just go peacefully to the air stage, which is the final stage where you might have heard of the death rattle. People have this and take their last breaths, which is a lot shorter stage. So these are the stages. So yeah, again, there's no black and white. There's rough guidelines, but everyone's different. Yeah. The male people, my granddad was a big learning curve for me, and I had conversation. Yeah, I remember I said before, and just I had that conversation with him, putting my fears aside of how he would react. And actually, had we never had that conversation, he wouldn't have the death he would ever had, because we were able to write a death plan and talk openly, honestly about death. And it was a really beautiful moment. So this is why I say to people, be honest and ask the questions out of love. And if people don't want to talk, then that's okay. At least you ask. But yeah, Philip, everyone's different, to answer your question. And yeah.
So thank you. This was one of the next questions I planned, because this was very short in our last podcast. Those elements of you explained them quick and nicely, but I thought we might do another round on that one and these elements, because it came a bit short because we talked so many other things and I was interested in the way. And it's interesting because you answered in a way the question how I expected you would answer it, just in a very wonderful way of being more inclusive. Because that's exactly what I have seen around my personal life, is that in this last stage that a lot of men that I've met wanted to make a final point or like a final statement, whatever it is. So they have to say something at the end. while a lot more women, they just want to be around or want to be with their loved ones and experience the community one more time. So that's why I asked this question, because I thought, is this just what happened to me in my surrounding, or is this a pattern? So in one way or the other, you explained it in a much better way. That's the way you live your life. And most likely more men have something suppressed than women. If you go statistically over 1 million people, most likely more men carry a secret than women. So that's would explain why most likely more men at the end of the day have to make a statement.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm scared of dying now.
That's okay. That's okay.
But this conversation, I was not scared before. Now. And by the way,
This is why they say it's better to die now as a human, to really be in touch with that ego self and see how transient it is, and just to acknowledge it's still part of you. But if you can, just own all your stuff, then what is there to die when that moment does come, rather than denying it, and then that's going to be a greater shock to you. So to just,
by the way, this is another thing I want to say thank you for the last podcast we had. It's not that my family is completely not talking about these things, but as you said, making a death plan, I remember the story with your grandfather. And I actually really tried to say, now, come on, after this podcast I made with you, let's go out, let's bring in my mother, and let's sit down and let's make plans. And even if we can talk easily and openly about it, but the planning we never did, who should be invited, who should be this, who should be that. And so actually I learned a lot from this last conversation with you to say, come on, don't let it slide, to say, tomorrow may never come. So it was really a good reminder. So I hope, if only that, some of the audience listened the same way I did and said, let's just not say tomorrow, let's just sit down. And it's, as you said, uncomfortable, not uncomfortable. It's really liberating. And I think I mentioned last time that I recently had the death of my father, and we were 1 billion% unprepared. And it was basically hell on earth. It was just, no time for grieving. It was just paperwork. And it lasted almost like a year of dealing with endless amount of paperology. And I was very sad that I didn't have the time to actually grieve, because it was just cleaning up administration.
Yeah. And so can I commend you for that? Thank you so much that you did that. And because you don't know when your time is up. And Phil, I feel called to tell you a story that I meant to tell you last time. You jogged my memory very quickly. Are we okay for time? Yeah.
It's super okay.
Lovely. I can work with people even though I don't know them. And I'll guess this is a kind of light little story, but this is how it is. And I'm just acceptant of people now that when I did this training, this 6-month course to become a soul-doula, it's essentially crossing people over the threshold, walking them home. If that doesn't align with people's beliefs, that's totally cool. But these are things that I've experienced and do. And you do not know when your time is going to come. So to give you an example, 2 years ago at Christmas Eve I was leaving my mother's house. She'd recently moved up here to be near to me. And as I was leaving her house, there was this old gentleman walking in front of the drive, so I couldn't actually move my car. Now, my initial thought was, oh, God, I wish he'd just hurry up. And then I thought, what are you doing? Like, he's just there taking his time. And I sent him a Christmas blessing. So this is how I play the games in my mind, challenging the thoughts. It's all good. And he's taking his time, doddering across the driveway, my car, and then he finally passes. And I just have a little chuckle to myself that someone triggered me and I got caught like that again in the game. And I drive on, and then a few hours later, my mum phoned me, and she was quite distressed. She said, "Dave, you're not going to guess what's happened." She said, "Someone's just died on my front lawn." And I immediately had a little chuckle, because I thought, well, only that could happen to someone like my mum, that someone can die on your front lawn. And then I said, "What did he look like?" He said he had a flat cap, and he was an old man. And it dawned on me that minute that I was probably the last person to see that man alive. And then so I did like a little ceremony for him on that evening on Christmas Eve. And actually it turned out I was helping him cross on a soul level over to the other side. And this can be very taxing on the energy system, because you're working on many planes of consciousness. So I was taking all the steps I'd learned, eating heavy carby foods, grounding, cleansing. And this is like death finds me sometimes, and I don't even have to know the person, but I was the last person to see that person alive. I just thought he was dodgering because he'd been out and had a few Christmas Eve drinks, but those were actually his last steps of his life. So this is why you never know when your last moments are going to be. And that man might have been going home to a family to see his Christmas Day the next day, but he never got to experience that. So it's quite an honour for me to actually, I think I was the last one to see him alive. Someone else could have, I don't know. But for me to actually see him and then have that little beautiful moment of walking him home on that soul level that I did some meditations with. So that was just a little example as well of another work I do, that sometimes people just gravitate towards me, and I have worked with people on astral planes and walking them home in the dream state, and you think you're going to sleep one night, but actually you're waking up the next day, you're exhausted because you're doing all this work on many levels. So this is why self-care is so important to what I do. So yeah, I just thought I'd share that story because I meant to say it before and it just cropped into my head. So I was clearly meant to say it for a reason, for whatever that is.
It looks like that I have to postpone. I would have at the beginning of December published this episode, but now it looks like we're coming closer to Christmas. If that's okay with you, but it's going to be the Christmas special of the year. And it's quite fun because last year I had an exorcist at the Christmas special.
Oh, wow.
And now
I love
talking
that.
about that. It's a Christmas special. They're going to get the reputation. It's the lunatic podcaster. And I'm really a full-blown Mr. Kringle. I'm Christmas crazy. And I have exorcist and death on Christmas Eve. I apologize to everybody listening right now. Merry Christmas, because this is Christmas episode.
Yeah, just enjoy it. Just enjoy the blessings of being with family, or have a Christmas, whatever that is it looks like to you. Yeah, exactly.
You're so absolutely right. And then if you're going that crazy, you mentioned it a couple of times, so let's bring it in. Let's go all out. What can happen? Ben.
Why not?
Yes, I do have, and I'm actually happy to talk with you about it because, yes, I have a lot of clairvoyants on my show as guests. I'm sure you're aware of it. And to talk a lot about the soul and talking to the death and all of this is just over and over on my show. And I'm always very happy to have them because I think it's rather interesting conversations, and people believe or don't believe or see the supernatural or they don't. Still, there's a lot to be learned. But none of them are real experts on the soul transition. And none of them actually were in the room several times or around people before or after when the soul transition actually happened. So I would just like to ask you straight out, do you personally believe that there is a soul transition happening? Can you speak on that matter?
From my personal experience, yes, I believe that. I would say I know that, and I know that sounds quite glib, but yeah, I know that. But that, again, I can only speak from my experience. That part of our soul, some people would say that the soul is in the body or the body is in the soul. I don't know. It's all one. It's all connected. That whatever that life force is withdrawing from this physical experience, and without that life force, the silver cord, if you like, that the body cannot be animated. It cannot generate, cannot have its experience anymore. And then, yeah, whatever part of what tiny fraction of the soul is cast down into this human body is then withdrawn and goes back to the totality of the soul. And then that soul, and we're talking about levels here, and we're getting into murky territory, and then that soul can go to an oversoul, and then that oversoul goes to whatever you want to call it, the void, oneness, yeah, God.
It's actually not what I want to talk with you about. Thank you so much that you have the knowledge. But for me, because you said something that was very important to me, you said people want to make their peace for this transition. And there's so much talking about this, that do you think that there is a different kind of soul transition or a different kind of relief when you die in peace or when you die just unresolved? Would you have any emotional response? Do you think that the soul by the end of the day gets the relief it needs no matter what? Or would you accept the idea that there's unresolved energy that can be an issue in the transition?
I've got to be careful how I speak about this because I don't want to put any fear into anyone. And I know a lot of people don't like this existence, and I totally understand why. I would personally say if there's unresolved issues, then that can create kind of attachments or baggage that maybe want to resolve on a soul level. But because we identify so heavily with the ego, we can never truly put ourselves and live from the soul. But when you meditate or have transcendental experiences that put you in contact with your soul, then you start to listen to that very quiet, subtle voice that's always there and guides you from the soul level, the heart essence, rather than that ego mind that's meant to help us have this experience but not actually guide us. But so many people identify with the ego and they think, well, I'm not coming back here. You're identifying with the ego, and where could you not go that the perfection isn't already? It's all here now. And I believe it's to find that, to create heaven on earth, so to speak. So I would say if anyone left with attachments, you're putting a certain set of emotions into the wheel. I'm careful how I talk to people about this because I don't want to create any sort of guilt or fear, because it's not about that, because there is only love. And listen, we all get to where we need to go eventually, because time's not real. And yeah, been playing this game for so long. But yeah, from a personal level, and I just know through moving through life, when I've lost attachments to things, when I have given up my clinging to certain situations or scenarios, I just feel lighter and life happens smoothly. So it's not like we enter into an automatic transition of enlightenment when we leave the body. We're still going to have some of those patterns or behaviors maybe etched deep within. Some people call it samsara, the scars, the wounds, the samskara and the samsara, which keep the kind of births going. But again, these are concepts as well. These are beliefs, aren't they? So I would just say to identify with love, to have no fear, and any mistakes you've made in life, just own them. It's okay. And they were meant to happen as well, deep down. And any guilt you carry, just, is that guilt serving you? I believe we've been raised in a society that guilt is a way of manipulating, and the shame we carry for ourselves. But love doesn't punish. Love doesn't demand punishment. Love just lets people grow. So any guilt, any shame, to just see through all that you can never do anything that's shameful, because you're learning. So that's a very long-winded answer, and I haven't really answered the question. I can appreciate that, but
The answer is exactly right. And I top it off before we can say goodbye, is I think this is also a two-way street. And because you said before, it's 2 years, you have to carry on. You said it's someone like a classic response to people in grieving. And I really wonder how these things are connected. It is most probably important for the grieving person who was loved one and attached to find a way in time to let this soul travel in peace. So that's something that's really, I think, important. And I think it's very important to try to clean us up much mess as possible. I agree with you. You eventually always arrive, but we talk about a smooth transition, a more peaceful transition, and coming from a place of love, as you just said, from the living ones who are still attached to the soul who wants to make the transition. So it's also I think, a place of grace and mercy to let the soul travel in its own time. And from the person itself, from the ego that has to fade away and let the soul return to its maker. So I think this is, would you be happy with this as a opening to you as last final words, or you think that is basically where we are?
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. But one thing about attachments, and someone you've loved, what the ego does, someone you've loved opens a feeling within you, don't know. When you fall in love with someone, you love it. And what the ego does, it wants to possess that person. When can I see you next? When can I be with you? I need you in order to feel that feeling. But that person isn't putting that feeling within you. That feeling is already there. It's always existed. That person is just the vehicle that's you're using that's awoke that feeling within you. And people want that feeling. So then the ego wants to grab that person so it can feel that feeling, and that's perfectly natural. But the thing is, that feeling, that love, is part of you. It's inherent. It's who and what you are. And that person can go and you can still have that love for them. And this is true soul love, because it's not possessive. It doesn't demand. It doesn't trap. It doesn't stifle. And if you can walk through life knowing that feeling is within you, and that just life in general, or just that core knowing, that being, touching that essence, that perfection of what you are, can awaken that feeling permanently, You no longer need to possess or have attachments to anyone or anything. And I mean, that's quite heavy stuff I'm talking about. And I've had this brought to my consciousness over the past month. I'm really learning this lesson about wanting to possess people, to have that feeling. But I don't need to be with that person. I don't need to be with anyone. I can just have that love. It's there. It's there. And that person's just awoke it within me, or whoever. Something doesn't have to be a person, can just be a sunset one day or anything. Just to live from that love and know it's always a part of you without the attachments, and to let the souls kind of transition, as you say, without clinging, and knowing that you always meet up. Love survives everything. It's there, isn't it? I know it sounds cliche and a bit fluffy, but it's the truth. So I hope that helps, Philip. And
this is a perfect answer and brings my little point to another level, and that's what we expect from you. David, thank you so very much on this Christmas special.
Hey, yeah.
Podcast.
Happy Christmas.
Happy Christmas, everyone, or Merry Christmas. Thank you so much, David. And I hope once a new book is out, you will remember our little podcast, all the information and links and everything. You said one-on-one services, public speaking services. There's already a book on the market. It's just everywhere you turn up. Thank you so much. And it just shows how deeply people need your service. And it's just must feel very good being you at the moment, knowing that you have something the world needs and that you actually feel so great and thankful being able to provide it. That's energy flowing in a wonderful way, and one can literally see the plants growing behind you happily. So that's always a plus. Thank you, David, very much.
Oh, Philip, thank you. Thank you.